The call came at 10:47 p.m., right when the Christmas lights in our apartment flickered for the second time that night. I remember the exact minute because I was kneeling on the living room rug, holding a nebulizer mask to my son's face, counting his breaths the way the pediatrician taught me. Slow, in through the nose, out through the mouth. The tree smelled faintly of pine, and the radiator knocked like it always did when the city air turned sharp. My phone vibrated on the coffee table. I almost ignored it. Christmas night had taught me not to expect anything good after dark. Evan had texted earlier, something vague about work drinks running late. I told myself not to overthink it. I always did. Then the screen lit up again. Unknown FaceTime call. I frowned. My hands were shaking just enough that I had to set the mask down and swipe to answer with my thumb. The camera turned on immediately. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. Soft yellow lighting, a hotel room, unmistakably expensive, a leather sofa, a half-empty champagne bottle sweating onto a glass table. And then Evan, my husband, slouched back, tie undone, laughing at something off-screen. The phone tilted. A woman leaned into frame. She was young, polished, wearing a silk dress that caught the light like it knew it belonged there. Her lipstick was perfect. Her smile was not. "Hi," she said, sweet as sugar. "You're Hannah, right?" My stomach dropped so hard I thought I might throw up. Behind me, my son coughed. The woman glanced at the screen, then back at Evan, amused. "He's had a lot to drink," she continued. "I don't really want to deal with this tonight." She shrugged, casual, like she was talking about returning a jacket that didn't fit. "So," she said, tilting her head, "could you come pick up your husband?" Evan lifted his eyes toward the phone then, finally noticing me. His smile faltered, just for a second. Not panic, not shame, annoyance. "Hannah," he muttered, "what are you doing up?" I stared at him. At the man who had kissed my forehead that morning. At the man whose insurance card was the only reason my son could breathe through plastic tubing in our living room. The woman laughed softly. "It's Christmas," she said. "I figured you'd want him home." Her eyes flicked to the corner of the screen, where my son's small hand was visible, clutching the edge of the couch. Something inside my chest cracked open. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't ask questions I already knew the answers to. I looked at Evan one last time. Then I said quietly, "No." The woman blinked. "Excuse me?" "I'm not coming," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine anymore. It sounded steady, cold, done. I ended the call. The apartment was silent except for the hum of the machine and my son's breathing. Outside, snow started to fall over Manhattan. And in that moment, I knew one thing with terrifying clarity. I wasn't going to pick him up. I was going to leave. I didn't give myself time to think. Thinking would have broken me. The moment the call ended, I moved on instinct, the way nurses do in emergencies. Fast, quiet, precise. I turned off the nebulizer, lifted my son into my arms, and pressed my cheek against his warm curls. His breathing had steadied, but his body was limp with exhaustion. "Mommy," he whispered. "We're going on a little trip," I said softly. "Just for tonight." I didn't say where. I didn't say why. I carried him into the bedroom and laid him on the bed, still in his Christmas pajamas. The red fabric was faded from too many washes. Evan had said we'd replace them next year. Evan said a lot of things. I opened the closet and froze. Half of it wasn't mine. Suits, dress shirts, leather shoes lined up like they belonged to someone important, someone untouchable. For years, I'd shrunk myself to make space for those things. Tonight, I ignored them. I grabbed a duffel bag from the top shelf, the one we used for weekend trips we never took anymore, and started throwing in whatever my hands landed on. Underwear, a sweater, my son's inhaler, his spare spacer mask, my passport. Then I remembered the folder. It was buried in the bottom drawer of my desk, under old birthday cards and expired warranties. I hadn't opened it in months. Inside were copies of medical bills, insurance statements, and printouts Evan told me not to worry about. "You'll just stress yourself out," he'd said. I slid the folder into the bag. My phone buzzed. A text from Evan. "Where are you?" I didn't answer. I moved through the apartment like a ghost, unplugging nothing, turning off no lights. I didn't want it to look like a departure. I wanted it to look like I might come back. In the kitchen, I hesitated. On the counter sat my laptop, closed, charging. For a second, I considered leaving it. Then I remembered Evan had changed the Wi-Fi password last month for security reasons. I took the laptop. My son stirred as I zipped the bag. "Daddy," he murmured, half asleep. The word hit harder than the call. I swallowed. "Daddy's busy," I said. It wasn't a lie. It was just incomplete. At the door, I slipped on my coat with one hand while balancing my son on the other. My keys jingled, too loud in the quiet apartment. I waited, heart pounding, but no one came out. No neighbors, no questions. The elevator ride down felt endless. My phone buzzed again. "Hannah, don't do this." I stepped out into the cold, the December air slicing through my lungs. Snow dusted the sidewalk, untouched. The city looked beautiful in the way things do right before they hurt you. I buckled my son into the back seat of the car that had pulled up, my hands numb, my mind blank. As the car pulled away, I looked back once. Our apartment building stood silent behind us, 7 years inside those walls. And I knew, without drama, without doubt, that whatever came next would be harder. But staying would have destroyed us both. Naomi didn't ask questions when she opened the door. That was the first thing that made me cry. It was almost midnight, the kind of late that turns city sounds into something hollow and far away. I stood there with my son asleep against my shoulder, snow melting into the hem of my coat, my duffel bag cutting into my palm. Naomi took one look at my face and stepped aside. "Come in," she said softly. The apartment was small but warm, the kind of warmth that seeps into your bones instead of bouncing off marble countertops. A lamp glowed in the corner. A mug sat on the table, still steaming, like she'd been waiting for someone who needed it. I laid my son down on the couch. He curled instinctively toward me, his hand finding my sleeve even in sleep. "He had a breathing treatment earlier," I whispered. "If he wakes up coughing—" Naomi nodded. "I've got it. Bathroom's there. Take your time." Take your time. I hadn't heard those words in years. I locked the bathroom door and leaned against it, my forehead pressing into the wood. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then my legs gave out. I slid down until I was sitting on the cold tile, my arms wrapped around myself like I might come apart if I let go. I didn't sob. Not at first. Tears just leaked. Quiet. Relentless. I saw the call again. The woman's smile. Evan's annoyed eyes. The way he hadn't asked if our son was okay. The way he never did anymore. I stayed there until my breathing slowed. When I came out, Naomi had placed a blanket over my son and dimmed the lights. She handed me a mug without a word. Chamomile. Honey. The way she used to make it during finals week when I was unraveling over exams that felt like the end of the world. We sat at the table. Only then did she ask, "Did he do something, or did he finally get caught?" I laughed once. It sounded wrong. "Both." I told her everything. The call, the hotel, the insurance, the locked accounts. I told her how Evan always said I was bad with money, how he handled the important stuff. How I stopped checking because it made him angry. Naomi didn't interrupt. She listened like a lawyer, but her eyes burned like a friend. When I finished, she folded her hands. "Hannah," she said carefully, "do you realize you just described financial control?" The word landed heavier than betrayal. I thought control was yelling, I said. Or hitting. It's also deciding who gets access to safety, she replied, and who doesn't. My phone buzzed on the table. Evan again. You're scaring me. Bring him home. We can talk. Naomi turned the screen face down. You don't respond tonight. What if he reports me? I whispered. What if he says I ran? You didn't run, she said. You protected your child. She stood and pulled a notebook from her bag. Tomorrow we plan. Tonight you sleep. I looked at my son, at the rise and fall of his chest. For the first time all night, my shoulders dropped. I slept for 3 hours. And when I woke up, my phone was full of missed calls, because Evan had realized something. I wasn't coming back. By morning, Evan had rewritten the story. I knew because my phone wouldn't stop buzzing, not with concern, not with apologies, but with messages carefully crafted to look reasonable if anyone else ever read them. Where did you take him? You can't just disappear with our child. People are worried. People, not me, not our son. I sat at Naomi's kitchen table, my hands wrapped around a mug I'd already forgotten to drink from. My body felt heavy, like gravity had increased overnight. 3 hours of sleep had done nothing to soften the dread settling into my chest. Naomi scanned the messages over my shoulder. He's documenting, she said quietly. Documenting what? A narrative, she replied. That you're unstable, emotional, acting without thinking. My stomach tightened. Can he do that? He can try. Another message came in. If you don't bring him back today, I'll have to involve a lawyer. I don't want it to get ugly. The irony almost made me laugh. Naomi slid my phone face down. From now on, you don't answer calls, only texts, short, neutral, no emotion. What do I say? She thought for a moment, then dictated slowly. Our son is safe. We will discuss arrangements through counsel. That's it. No explanations, no defenses. My fingers hovered over the screen as I typed. Every instinct in me wanted to add more, to justify, to plead, to make him understand. Instead, I sent the message exactly as she said. The reply came less than 30 seconds later. This is not like you, Hannah. That one hurt the most. By noon, the consequences became real. I tried to refill my son's prescription at the pharmacy down the block. The pharmacist frowned at her screen, clicked again, then looked up with practiced sympathy. I'm sorry, she said. Your insurance coverage is inactive. Inactive, I echoed. That can't be right. She turned the monitor slightly. It was suspended this morning. The floor tilted. Evan hadn't just been angry. He'd been strategic. I stepped outside with my son bundled against my chest, the winter air burning my lungs. I called Evan without thinking. He didn't answer. I texted, The insurance is off. What did you do? This time he waited. Then, You took our child without my consent. I had to protect myself. Protect himself. Naomi's jaw tightened when I showed her the screen. This, she said, is why you left. Fear finally punched through the shock. What if I can't get his medication? I whispered. What if he has another attack? Naomi met my eyes. Then we act fast. She opened her laptop, fingers flying. Emergency coverage, temporary orders. And Hannah, listen to me very carefully. I nodded, barely breathing. He's escalating because he's losing control, she said. That makes him dangerous, but it also makes him sloppy. My phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Evan. It was an unknown number. The message read, You don't know how bad this is going to get. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding, because this wasn't Evan's voice, and that's when I realized someone else had decided to step into the story. The pharmacy incident was the moment fear stopped being abstract. It had a shape, a weight, a sound, the soft wheeze in my son's chest as we sat on Naomi's couch, waiting to see if his breathing would worsen without the medication he depended on. I didn't cry this time. I felt something colder. Naomi was already moving, her laptop open, legal pads spread across the table. "Emergency pediatric coverage can take hours," she said, "but there's something else we need to do now." She turned the screen toward me. "We start building your record." "My record?" I asked. "Yes," she replied, "because Evan is building his." She asked me to think back, not emotionally, factually, dates, times, messages, anything that felt off in hindsight. I closed my eyes and forced myself to remember the last 6 months, not as a wife, but as a witness. "The credit card statements," I said slowly. "He stopped sending me access last spring." Naomi nodded. "You ever see them after that?" "Only summaries," I said. "Totals, never itemized." "Do you still have old ones?" I hesitated, then stood. My duffel bag was still by the door, half unzipped. I dug through it until my fingers touched the manila folder I'd grabbed without really knowing why. We spread the papers across the table, medical bills, insurance explanations, and then, there they were. Credit card statements from before Evan locked me out. Naomi leaned in. "Here," she said, tapping a line. "Hotel charge, Midtown, Tuesday night." "That was supposed to be a supplier dinner," I murmured. She flipped another page. "Another one. Same hotel. Different date." My stomach clenched. We cross-checked the dates with Evan's calendar emails, automated invites he'd forgotten to delete from our shared account. Late meetings, vendor calls, travel that never happened. A pattern emerged. "Do you know her name?" Naomi asked gently. I swallowed. Maddie." Naomi typed it into her browser, then paused. "Hannah. Look." On the screen was a LinkedIn profile. Madeline Ross, vendor account executive. Same logistics company Evan oversaw contracts for. My hands went numb. "This isn't just an affair," Naomi said quietly. "This is a conflict of interest." My phone buzzed. A text from Evan. "I'm giving you one last chance to come home and fix this like adults." Naomi shook her head. "Don't respond." Another buzz. "If this goes public, you'll destroy our son's life." That one almost worked. Almost. Naomi closed the laptop and looked at me. "He's afraid," she said, "and that means we're close to something he doesn't want exposed." My son stirred, coughing softly. I scooped him into my arms, feeling the fragile strength of his little body against mine. I thought of the hotel room, the silk dress, the insurance being cut off with a keystroke. "I trusted him," I said. "I know," Naomi replied, "but now you protect yourself." Her phone rang. She glanced at the screen, then looked up at me, eyes sharp. "Hannah," she said, "someone from Evan's company just emailed me." My heart started pounding. "Who?" She read the name slowly. "Thomas Reed, Chief Operating Officer." I stared at her. "Why would he contact you?" Naomi exhaled. "Because I think Evan isn't the only one being watched anymore." Thomas Reed's email was short, too short to be casual. Naomi read it twice, then a third time, her jaw tightening a little more each time. "He wants to talk," she said, privately. "About Evan?" I asked. "About irregularities," she replied carefully, "which usually means Evan." My pulse thudded in my ears. "Is that good?" "It's dangerous," Naomi said honestly. "And useful." Before I could ask what that meant, my phone rang again. Evan. I ignored it. It rang again. Then again. Finally, a text came through. "I know you're with Naomi Brooks. I also know where she lives." My hands went cold. Naomi took the phone from me, read the message, then placed it face down on the table with deliberate calm. "He's bluffing," she said. "But we don't test bluffs when children are involved." As if summoned by the tension, my son started coughing from the couch. Not a bad attack, yet, but enough to snap my nerves tight. I reached for his inhaler and froze. The canister felt too light. I shook it, almost empty. Panic surged. "Naomi, I need a refill today, not tomorrow. Today." "I know," she said. "I've been working on it." She pulled up a state emergency coverage form on her laptop, pages of fine print. Processing times that made my stomach drop. "Evan knows this," I whispered. "He knows I'm stuck." "That's why he's pushing," Naomi said. "He thinks you'll fold." Right on cue, another text arrived. "If you come home now, I'll reinstate the insurance. We can pretend none of this happened." I stared at the words. There it was. The bargain. My child's health in exchange for my silence. For a split second, I hated myself for considering it. I imagined walking back into that apartment, apologizing, letting him rewrite the story so my son could breathe without plastic tubes and panic. Naomi saw it on my face. "Hannah," she said gently, "if you go back now, this will never stop." "I know," I whispered. "But what if he has another attack?" She leaned forward. "Then we document this message. And we act." She took screenshots, backed them up, sent copies to herself and a secure drive. "This," she said, pointing at the text, "is coercion." My phone buzzed again. "You have until 5 p.m. I looked at the clock. 2:12. Less than 3 hours. Naomi's laptop chimed. An incoming message. She opened it, read silently, then let out a slow breath. "What?" I asked. "Thomas Reed," she said. "He agreed to meet today, off-site. He says there's something you need to hear directly." A chill ran through me. "Why me?" "Because," Naomi replied, "whatever Evan's been hiding, it involves you more than he ever told you." As if to underline her words, my phone lit up with one final message from Evan. "If you don't come back, I won't protect you anymore." I looked at my son, his chest rising and falling, fragile and trusting. I didn't respond. Instead, I picked up my coat. "Let's go," I said. The cafe Thomas Reed chose was nothing like Evan's usual places. No polished marble, no waiters in pressed suits, just a quiet corner spot near the river. The kind of place executives went when they didn't want to be seen, pretending everything was fine. Floor-to-ceiling windows let in the gray afternoon light, and the hum of conversation stayed low, deliberate. Thomas was already there when we arrived. He stood when he saw me, tall, composed, his expression unreadable in the way only people trained to manage crises ever master. He didn't reach for my hand. He didn't offer sympathy. He nodded once, respectfully. "Hannah," he said, "thank you for coming on such short notice." Naomi stayed close, a silent anchor at my side. We sat. Coffee was ordered and barely touched. "I'm going to be very direct," Thomas began, "because time matters." My stomach tightened. "For the last 6 months," he continued, "our internal audit team has flagged inconsistencies in vendor billing tied to Evan's department." I glanced down at my hands, clenched in my lap. "Midtown hotels," he said. "Unapproved travel expenses. Repeated charges under vague categories." My breath caught. "He told me those were supplier meetings," I said. Thomas nodded. "That's what he reported. But the vendors never attended." Naomi leaned forward. "Including Madeline Ross?" Thomas's eyes flicked to her, then back to me. "Yes." The word landed heavier than I expected. "This wasn't a lapse in judgment," Thomas continued. "It was systematic. And what complicates things is that Evan listed you as a dependent beneficiary on certain reimbursements." My head snapped up. "What does that mean?" "It means," Thomas said carefully, "that some of the funds he moved were justified internally as family-related expenses. Medical, housing, childcare." My chest tightened. "I never saw that money." "I know," he replied. "That's the problem." Silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. "So, when Evan cut your insurance yesterday," Thomas added. He wasn't just being cruel, he was panicking. Naomi's voice was steady. Because exposure means termination, and potential civil action, and loss of protection, Thomas said, for everyone involved. I thought of the hotel room, the champagne, the woman on the screen smiling like she'd already won. She knew, I said softly. Thomas didn't argue. She benefited. I swallowed hard. Why are you telling me this? Because, he said, meeting my eyes for the first time. If this comes out publicly, you'll be painted as complicit, or worse, ungrateful. My pulse spiked. I didn't know. I believe you, he replied, but belief isn't evidence. Naomi closed her notebook. So what are you asking? Thomas exhaled. I'm asking you to protect yourself. He slid a folder across the table. Inside is documentation Evan assumed you'd never see, he said. Expense reports, emails, authorizations with your name attached. My hands shook as I touched the folder. And in return? Naomi asked. Thomas's jaw tightened. In return, the company handles this internally before it becomes a scandal. Before Evan could spin it. My phone buzzed. A message from Evan. You have 1 hour left. I looked at the folder again, and for the first time since Christmas night, I understood something clearly. Evan hadn't been protecting me all these years. He'd been hiding behind me, and now, the shield was gone. I didn't open the folder right away. I carried it out of the cafe like it might explode in my hands, my heart beating too fast for the cold afternoon air. Naomi walked beside me in silence, letting my thoughts catch up to the moment. Across the river, the city moved on, indifferent. People hurried with shopping bags and holiday plans, unaware that my marriage was collapsing into something much darker than betrayal. We didn't go back to her apartment. We sat in the car instead, parked along a quiet side street. The heater hummed softly. My son slept in the back seat, exhausted from the tension he couldn't name. Only then did I open the folder. The first page was an expense report, Evan's name at the top. My name underneath, listed as a dependent justification, medical-related reimbursement, family wellness travel. I felt sick. Page after page followed. Emails where Evan referenced Hannah's stress, our child's condition. Words I'd never approved, never even seen, used to excuse nights in hotels and charges I'd been blamed for not understanding. He made you the alibi, Naomi said quietly. I nodded. And if this goes public, I'm the wife who benefited? Exactly. My phone buzzed. Evan, I ignored it. Another message followed. I know you talked to someone today. This doesn't have to get messy. Naomi stiffened. He knows. A third message appeared before I could respond. Let's meet. Just us. I'll fix everything. I swear. I stared at the screen. For a moment, just one, I wanted to believe him. I wanted the relief of a clean ending. An apology that wrapped around the damage and made it smaller than it really was. Naomi shook her head slowly. This is the trap. What trap? He wants you on record, she said. Admitting something, anything, a conversation he can twist. My phone rang. Evan again. I didn't answer. Instead, a text came through. Different number. Madeline Ross. I froze. She didn't waste time. You think Evan's the problem? He's not. You are. My chest tightened. She continued. You made him miserable. I just gave him a reason to breathe again. If you play nice, you'll still get something out of this. Naomi read over my shoulder. There it is. My hands shook as I typed back, then stopped. I deleted the words before sending. No, I said aloud. I'm not talking to either of them. That's smart, Naomi replied, because the next move isn't emotional. It's strategic. She pulled up her calendar. Tomorrow morning, we file for temporary orders, custody, support, insurance reinstatement. And Evan? I asked. He'll panic, she said, and panic makes people careless. As if summoned by the word, my phone buzzed again. Evan this time. I answered, put him on speaker, and said nothing. Hannah, he began, voice smooth, rehearsed. I'm sorry about the call, about everything. I was drunk. It meant nothing. I looked at my sleeping child in the rearview mirror. You cut our son's insurance, I said flatly. Silence. Then softer, you left me no choice. That was the moment, the exact second I understood. This wasn't a man trying to save his family. This was a man trying to save himself, and tomorrow the game would change. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my name typed neatly beneath Evan's expense reports, like a forged signature on a life I never agreed to live. By morning, the city felt sharper, louder, as if it knew something was about to break. Naomi arrived early with coffee and a plan. We don't confront, she said, setting her bag down. We observe. Before I could ask what that meant, my phone buzzed. Evan. Can we please meet? Just for 10 minutes. Somewhere public. I stared at the message, my pulse steady this time. Is this a mistake? I asked. Naomi shook her head. No, this is useful. We chose a place Evan liked to be seen. A restaurant near his office, all glass and brushed steel. Lunch crowd, cameras, witnesses. Evan believed public spaces made him safe. I arrived alone. Naomi waited nearby. Evan stood when he saw me, relief flickering across his face before he smoothed it away. He looked tired, unshaven, smaller somehow. Hannah, he said, reaching for my hand. I stepped back. He cleared his throat and smiled weakly. I've been under a lot of pressure. I know, I said. I've seen the reports. His smile froze. I don't know what Naomi's been filling your head with, he said carefully, but Madeline has nothing to do with our marriage. There it was. She's not just an affair, I replied. She's a vendor. Evan laughed once, sharp. That's ridiculous. So are the reimbursements, I said quietly. For the first time, his composure cracked. You don't understand how things work, he snapped, then caught himself. I was protecting you. By cutting our son's insurance? People nearby shifted, ears turning. Evan leaned in, voice low. You're making this worse. I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table, screen up. Then explain this. I slid one document forward, then another. His eyes scanned the pages, color draining from his face. That money, he said slowly, was going to come back. When? I asked. He didn't answer. I stood. This conversation is over. Hannah, he said urgently, if you walk away now, you lose any chance of a settlement. I looked at him, really looked, at the man who thought I still needed his permission. Evan, I said, you already lost. I turned to leave. That's when my phone buzzed. Madeline Ross. I stopped. A message appeared. Meet me. You deserve to know the truth. I showed Naomi later. She went still. This, she said, is the twist. We met Madeline that afternoon. She was calm, smiling, confident in a way that told me she thought she was untouchable. You think Evan used me, she said, stirring her drink. But it was mutual. She leaned closer. He told me you signed off on everything, she continued, that you were grateful. My stomach dropped. And when I realized he'd pinned it all on you, she added softly, I called you on Christmas. I stared at her. You didn't want him picked up, I said. She smiled. I wanted you to break. Outside, sirens wailed. Inside, everything clicked. Madeline hadn't just slept with my husband. She'd helped build the lie. And now she was about to learn what happens when the wrong woman stops breaking. I didn't expect the call to come from her. When my phone lit up with Grace Cole, I almost didn't answer. Evan's mother had never called me directly in 7 years of marriage. Everything went through Evan. Always had. I stared at the screen until it stopped ringing. Then it rang again. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Hannah," she said. Her voice was tight, controlled, the way women sound when they're holding something back. "Where is my grandson?" The question wasn't hostile. It was scared. "He's with me," I replied. "He's safe." A pause. I could hear her breathing on the other end. "Evan says you ran off," she said, "that you're confused." I closed my eyes. "That's not true," I said quietly, "and I think you know that." Silence stretched between us. "I want to see him," she finally said. "Today." Naomi nodded when I told her. "Public place," she said, "and you don't go alone." We met at a small bakery near the park, neutral ground. Families, strollers, noise, safety. Grace arrived 10 minutes early. Standing stiffly by the window, her coat buttoned wrong. When she saw my son, her face softened instantly. She knelt, opened her arms, and he went to her without hesitation. That broke something in her. "He looks thinner," she murmured. "He's been sick," I said. "You didn't know because Evan didn't tell you." Grace straightened slowly. "He said you were exaggerating." "I have the medical records," I replied. We sat. Grace folded her hands around her coffee and stared into it like it might confess something. "He came to see me last night," she said. "Very upset." I waited. "He told me you were trying to ruin him," she continued, "that you were talking to his company, that you'd lost perspective." I met her eyes. "Did he tell you he cut his son's insurance?" Her head snapped up. "He did what?" I slid my phone across the table. Screenshots. Dates. The text where Evan offered to reinstate coverage if I came home. Grace read every word. Her hands started to shake. "He promised me he'd never be like his father," she whispered. The words landed heavy. I remembered stories she'd told late at night, wine in hand, about a husband who controlled everything until there was nothing left of her but silence. "He's doing exactly that," I said gently. Grace closed her eyes. When she opened them again, something had changed. "There are documents," she said slowly, "in my safe, insurance policies, accounts he asked me to hold years ago. He said it was for you and the baby." My heart started racing. "I don't think they are," she continued, "and I think you need them." Naomi leaned forward. "That would help clarify asset control." Grace nodded once. "Then I'll give them to you." My phone buzzed. "Evan. Mom isn't answering. Where are you?" Grace glanced at the screen, then back at me. "You don't have to fight him alone," she said. For the first time since Christmas night, I believed that. Across the park, my son laughed, clear, bright, breathing easily. And somewhere inside Evan's carefully built world, the foundation had just cracked. Evan struck back the next morning. Not with rage, not with threats, with paperwork. Naomi was the one who saw it first. She was standing at the kitchen counter, coffee untouched, scrolling through her phone with a tight expression I had learned to fear. "He filed," she said. "Filed what?" I asked, even though my chest already knew. "An emergency motion," she replied. "Claiming you removed your child without consent and are refusing contact." The words felt unreal, like reading someone else's life. "But he cut the insurance," I said. "He knows our son was sick." "Yes," Naomi said calmly. "And he also knows courts move fast when a father claims alienation." My son sat on the floor nearby, lining up toy cars with intense concentration. He hummed softly, unaware that his life was being turned into a legal argument. The knock came an hour later, 2 firm taps, professional, not police, but close enough to make my hands shake. Naomi answered the door. The man introduced himself politely. "Family court services." He held a clipboard and a neutral expression, the kind people wear when they're trained not to feel. "We've received a report," he said. "We need to verify the child's location and condition." I stepped forward before Naomi could speak. "He's here. He's safe." The man nodded, checking a box. "May I see him?" I hesitated for half a second, then moved aside. My son looked up, confused but calm. The man knelt, asked his name, commented on his cars, listened to his breathing, took notes. "So," the man said finally, standing, "the father claims you're preventing contact." "I'm not," I replied. "I'm asking for it to go through counsel." He nodded again. "That will be noted." As he turned to leave, my phone buzzed. "Evan." I ignored it. Then a text. "You're making me do this. I just want my son." Naomi read it and snorted softly. "He wants control. He wants you scared." And it worked. By noon, Evan's attorney had emailed, aggressive language, accusations. A request for immediate return of the child pending hearing. My hands trembled as I read it. "What if they make me hand him over?" I whispered. "What if they believe him?" Naomi placed her hand over mine. "They won't, if we move faster." She opened her laptop and started attaching files. Medical records, screenshots, insurance suspension timestamps. Evan's text offering to reinstate coverage in exchange for my return. "This," she said, pointing at the screen, "changes everything." My phone buzzed again. This time it was Grace. "He came to my house," she said, her voice low, "demanding documents." "And?" I asked. "I told him no," she replied. "He yelled. I recorded it." A pause. "Hannah," she continued, "he said you'd never survive without him." I looked at my son, now asleep on the couch, his chest rising evenly. "Neither will he," I said softly. Naomi smiled grimly. "That's the thing about men who use fear." She hit send on the filings. "They forget what happens when it stops working." Outside, sirens wailed somewhere distant. Inside, the war had officially begun. And this time, Evan had overplayed his hand. The shift came quietly. No shouting, no confrontation, just an email. It arrived at 8:14 p.m. while my son was coloring at the coffee table and Naomi was reviewing filings on her laptop. The subject line was so ordinary I almost deleted it without opening. "Internal review, request for clarification." Naomi froze when she saw the sender. Thomas Reed. "This isn't routine," she said. I opened it. The message was formal, carefully worded, but every sentence carried weight. "Hannah, as part of an internal compliance review. We've identified several reimbursements and communications that reference your name and dependent status. For the record, we need to confirm whether you authorized or benefited from the following expenses." Below the paragraph was a list: hotels, flights, wellness travel, medical justifications tied to my son's condition. My chest tightened. "He put your name on everything," Naomi said softly. "If you don't respond, it looks like consent." "And if I do?" I asked. "Then the truth becomes permanent." I scrolled. Attached were PDFs, email chains, Evan's words in writing. "Hannah's anxiety has been high lately. This time away is necessary for family stability. Medical stress at home makes off-site meetings preferable." I felt sick. He hadn't just lied to me, he'd weaponized my motherhood. My phone buzzed. Evan. I let it go to voicemail. Then a text. "I know Reed reached out. Don't answer him. I'll handle it." Naomi laughed once, sharp. "Of course he will." I typed my response slowly, every word deliberate. I did not authorize, attend, or benefit from any of the listed expenses. I was unaware of these charges until this week. I am prepared to provide documentation. I hovered over send. "What happens after this?" I asked. Naomi met my eyes. "After this, he can't hide behind you anymore." I sent it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then my phone exploded with notifications, missed calls, voicemails, Evan's name lighting up the screen again and again. I didn't answer. Naomi's laptop chimed. Another email, this one marked confidential. Thomas again. Thank you for confirming. Based on your response, the company is initiating a formal investigation effective immediately. You may be contacted for further clarification. Naomi exhaled slowly. That's it, she said. He's suspended. My legs went weak. I sat down hard on the couch. From the hallway, my son looked up. Mommy? I smiled at him. I'm okay. My phone buzzed again. This time, a voicemail came through before I could stop it. Hannah? Evan's voice cracked, raw with anger and fear. What did you do? I stared at the screen, my heart pounding, but not with panic, with clarity. You did this, he continued. You're trying to ruin me. I deleted the message. Outside, the city lights blinked on one by one. Inside, something settled. For years, Evan had controlled the story by speaking first, louder, with confidence I mistook for truth. Now the paper trail spoke instead, and it didn't need his permission. As Naomi closed her laptop, she looked at me and said, "This is the point of no return." I nodded, because for the first time, the future didn't terrify me. It waited, and Evan had finally lost the power to decide what it would look like. The email arrived just after midnight. I was half asleep on the couch, my son curled against my side, his breathing finally deep and even. Naomi had gone home for a few hours, leaving me with strict instructions to rest. I was staring at the ceiling, counting cracks, when my phone buzzed softly on the coffee table. Unknown sender. No subject line. Just one attachment. For a long moment, I didn't open it. Some instinct warned me that whatever was inside would change the shape of everything again. Not legally, emotionally, the kind of change you can't undo once it settles into your bones. I tapped the screen. The image loaded slowly. It was a photo taken in a hotel lobby, the kind with marble floors and tall mirrors that make people look more important than they are. Evan stood near the front desk, his arm wrapped around Madeline's waist. Her head was tilted up toward him, laughing. His face was turned toward her in a way I hadn't seen in years. Soft, unguarded, intimate. But that wasn't what made my hands start shaking. It was the timestamp. December 24th, 10:49 p.m., 2 minutes after the call. I stared at the screen until the details burned into my mind. His loosened tie, her red heels, the reflection in the mirror behind them, proof it wasn't staged, wasn't a coincidence, wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a drunken mistake. It was a choice. A sob tore out of me before I could stop it. I pressed my hand to my mouth, terrified of waking my son. Tears slid down my face silently, hot and relentless. I hadn't cried like this yet. Not when I left, not when the insurance was cut, not when Evan tried to take my child. This was different. This was grief, for the woman I used to be, for the marriage I kept trying to save alone. For every night I told myself I was imagining the distance, the coldness, the way he looked through me instead of at me. My phone buzzed again. A message followed the photo. I didn't mean for it to go this far, but he promised me you knew. I closed my eyes. Madeline. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded the email to Naomi. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Then my phone rang. Naomi's voice was quiet when I answered. Are you okay? No, I whispered. But I understand now. That photo, she said carefully, corroborates the expense reports. Location. Time. Intent. I don't care about that part, I said. Not tonight. She paused. What do you care about? I looked down at my son, his small fingers curled into the fabric of my sweater, trusting, unaware. I care that I almost went back, I said. I care that I doubted myself." "You didn't," Naomi replied. "You listened. Eventually." The call ended, and I sat there in the quiet, the photos still glowing on my screen. For years, Evan survived on ambiguity, on making me question what I saw, what I felt, what I deserved. That photo ended the debate. It didn't just expose him to the company or the court, it exposed the truth to me. And as painful as it was, I felt something unexpected beneath the grief. Relief. Because once the lie was fully visible, it lost its power. And I knew, deep down, that this was the moment everything would finally start turning in my favor. The courtroom smelled like old paper and stale coffee. It wasn't dramatic the way movies made it seem. No gasps, no shouting, just quiet tension stretched tight enough to snap. Evan sat at the opposite table in a tailored suit that didn't quite hide the tremor in his hands. His lawyer leaned in, whispering constantly, as if speed could undo what had already been filed. I sat beside Naomi, my back straight, my hands folded carefully in my lap. This hearing wasn't about who was right, it was about who was stable. The judge entered without ceremony, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and a voice that suggested she had seen every version of human excuse imaginable. "Temporary custody and support," she said. "Let's proceed." Evan's attorney went first. He spoke smoothly about concern, about a confused mother, about a sudden disappearance, about a father who only wanted access to his child. I listened without reacting. Then it was Naomi's turn. She stood and spoke plainly. No drama, just facts, medical records, insurance suspension timestamps. Evan's written offer to reinstate coverage in exchange for my return. Screenshots of messages. The photo from the hotel lobby. The judge didn't interrupt. She didn't raise her eyebrows. She just listened. When Naomi finished, the judge finally looked at Evan. "Mr. Cole," she said, "did you suspend your child's insurance coverage on December 26th? Evan hesitated. His lawyer shifted. "Yes," Evan said, "but only temporarily." "And why?" the judge asked. "I believed my wife had taken our child without consent," he replied. The judge nodded once, then turned to me. "Ms. Cole," she said gently, "why did you leave the marital home?" My throat tightened, but my voice held. "Because my child was sick," I said. "And because my husband was with another woman on Christmas night. I was afraid of what he would do next." Silence settled over the room. The judge glanced at the file again, then back at Evan. "Did you inform your wife of this relationship?" she asked. "No," Evan said quietly. "Did you list your wife as a dependent justification on company reimbursements without her knowledge?" Evan's mouth opened. His lawyer stood. "Objection." The judge raised a hand. "Overruled." Evan swallowed. Yes, that was it. No speech, no apology. Just truth, finally spoken where it mattered. The judge leaned back in her chair. "Temporary custody is awarded to the mother," she said. "The father will have supervised visitation pending further review." Evan's head snapped up. "Supervised?" "Given the evidence of coercion and financial control," the judge continued, "this court prioritizes the child's stability." She turned to me again. "Ms. Cole," she said, "support payments will begin immediately. Insurance coverage is to be reinstated today." My chest filled with air I hadn't realized I was holding. The gavel came down. As we stood to leave, Evan looked at me, really looked, for the first time in years. Not angry, not confident, afraid. Outside the courtroom, Naomi squeezed my hand. "You did it," she said. I shook my head. "No." I glanced back at the closed doors. He did this to himself. And for the first time, justice didn't feel like revenge. It felt like protection. Madeline didn't disappear quietly. She showed up 3 days after the hearing exactly the way women like her always do. unannounced, composed, convinced the world still owed her something. I was buckling my son into his car seat outside Naomi's apartment when I heard the click of heels behind me. Hannah. I turned slowly. She stood there in a tailored coat, hair flawless, lips curved into a smile that had lost its edge. For the first time since Christmas, she looked uncertain. "We need to talk," she said. "I don't," I replied, closing the car door. She flinched, then recovered. "This isn't about Evan." I almost laughed. "You should know," she continued, lowering her voice. "He told me everything was under control, that the company would protect him, that you'd back down." "And?" I asked. Her jaw tightened. "They terminated my contract this morning." There it was. No drama, no tears, just the hollow echo of consequences finally arriving. "They said I violated ethics guidelines," she went on, bitterness seeping through, "that I compromised negotiations. I didn't even get a chance to explain." I folded my arms. "Explain what? That you slept with a married man and billed his company for it?" Her eyes flashed. "You don't understand how this works." "I understand perfectly," I said. "You thought you were upgrading. Turns out you were disposable." She stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. "He promised me a future," she said, quieter now. "He said you were already gone." I stepped closer, close enough that she could see there was no anger left in my face. "He promised me stability," I said, "and used my child's health to pay for hotel rooms, so forgive me if I don't feel sorry for you." She swallowed. "He won't recover from this. That's not my problem." She hesitated, then pulled out her phone. "There are messages," she said. "From him, things he said about you, about how you'd never leave." I shook my head. "Keep them." Her expression cracked. "Why?" "Because I don't need them," I said. "The truth already did its job." A long silence stretched between us, the winter air sharp and unforgiving. "I thought breaking you would free him," she said finally. I met her eyes. "You didn't break me. You exposed him." She turned away then, shoulders stiff, walking back down the sidewalk with nothing but her heels and her pride to keep her upright. That night, my phone buzzed. A notification from Naomi. "Evan's accounts have been frozen pending civil review." I sat on the couch, my son asleep beside me, and let the quiet settle. For years, Evan had convinced two women they were competing for his approval. In the end, he lost them both. Madeline lost her career, her illusion of power, and the man she thought was worth destroying another woman for. Evan lost control, and I lost nothing that wasn't already gone. For the first time, the story wasn't about who he chose. It was about who survived. And this time, it was me. Evan stopped calling after the accounts were frozen. That silence was louder than any threat he'd ever made. For days, the only signs of him came through paperwork, emails from attorneys, official notices, carefully worded updates that all said the same thing in different ways. His life was unraveling, and he couldn't stop it. Naomi came over one afternoon with a thin smile and a thick folder. "You're going to want to sit down," she said. I did. "The company completed its preliminary review," she continued. "They found enough evidence to move forward with civil action." My heart skipped. "Civil, as in?" "As in repayment," she said. "Penalties, and a permanent mark on his record." I exhaled slowly. "So no quiet exit?" "No," Naomi replied. "No golden parachute, no graceful resignation." That night, Evan finally broke his silence. He showed up, not at Naomi's place, he knew better than that now, but at my temporary apartment. I saw him through the peephole, standing in the hallway like a man who'd misplaced his authority somewhere between floors. I didn't open the door. "Hannah," he called softly. "Please." I leaned my forehead against the wood, my heart pounding, not with fear, but with disbelief at how small he sounded. "I know you're in there," he said. "We need to talk." "You can talk to my lawyer," I replied. A pause. "They're going to ruin me," he said. "You don't understand," I almost laughed. "You ruined yourself," I said. "I just stopped covering for you." His voice cracked. "I was under pressure." "So was I," said. "Every day. With a sick child and no access to money, and I didn't hurt anyone." Silence. Then quieter. "I never thought you'd go this far." That was the truth, finally spoken. "You never thought I'd leave," I corrected. "You never thought I'd tell the truth." I heard him slide down the wall outside, his breath uneven. "They're suspending my license," he said. "No one will hire me." I closed my eyes. For a moment, pity flickered. Not for the man he was, but for the man he chose to be. "I hope you get help," I said, "for our son's sake." "That's it?" he asked. "After everything?" "Yes," I replied. "That's it." I walked away from the door. The next morning, the news spread quietly through the professional circles Evan once ruled. A manager under investigation, ethics violations, improper vendor relationships. Nothing flashy, just enough to make people distance themselves. Grace called me later, her voice tired but steady. "He's blaming everyone," she said. "But he knows." I looked out the window at my son playing on the rug, laughing freely. "Good," I said, "because I'm done carrying his shame." That evening, Naomi forwarded one last update. Formal charges filed, supervised visitation extended, financial disclosures ordered. I set my phone down and sat with the weight of it all. This wasn't revenge. This was consequence. Evan built his life on the belief that he was untouchable, that love meant silence, and power meant control. Now the structure he'd spent years reinforcing was collapsing under the weight of its own lies. And for the first time, I wasn't inside it anymore. I was standing safely outside, watching it fall. The quiet that followed Evan's collapse felt unnatural at first. For weeks, my body had lived in survival mode, listening for footsteps, bracing for the next email, the next threat, the next twist designed to pull me back under his control. When the noise stopped, my nerves didn't know how to rest, but life kept moving. The first supervised visitation happened on a Saturday morning. A small neutral room at a family services center, beige walls, plastic chairs, a box of worn toys in the corner. Nothing about it felt like a place for love, and that was the point. I brought my son in, his hand tight around mine. "Is Daddy in trouble?" he asked quietly. I knelt in front of him, smoothing his hair. "Daddy made some bad choices," I said. "But you didn't. And you're safe." He nodded, trusting me the way children do when the world still makes sense through their parents. Evan was already there. He looked thinner, smaller, not defeated but stripped. No confidence left to lean on. When he saw our son, his face crumpled for a moment before he caught himself. "Hey, buddy," he said softly. My son waved, uncertain, then turned to me. I gave him a small nod. "I'll be right outside," I said. I didn't stay to watch. That was another boundary I refused to cross. Instead, I sat in my car and breathed. Deep, slow, in through the nose, out through the mouth, the same way I'd taught my son. When the hour was over, the supervisor walked him back to me. He seemed fine, quiet, but calm. "He did okay," the woman said. "You're doing the right thing." Those words stayed with me all day. That afternoon, Naomi called. "Financial disclosures are in," she said. "He's worse off than he let on." I wasn't surprised. "What about support?" I asked. "Court-ordered, automatic deductions, no room for games." I closed my eyes, relief washing through me. Not joy, but stability. The kind that lets you plan grocery lists and school schedules without panic. Later that evening, another call came. Thomas Reed. "I wanted you to hear it from me," he said. "The company finalized its decision. Evan is terminated, effective immediately." I thanked him, my voice steady. "And Hannah," he added after a pause, "none of this reflects on you. Internally, that's been made clear." When the call ended, I sat on the edge of the bed and looked around my small apartment. It wasn't much, second-hand furniture, boxes still unpacked. But it was quiet, no tension humming in the walls, no footsteps to anticipate, no phone buzzing with demands. That night, I tucked my son into bed and lay down beside him, listening to the rhythm of his breathing. For the first time in months, I slept. Not because everything was fixed, but because the danger had passed. Evan had lost the power to rewrite reality. And I had learned something I would never forget. Peace doesn't arrive with noise. It comes quietly when you finally stop being afraid to choose yourself. The news didn't break loudly. It didn't need to. In Evan's world, silence was louder than headlines. It started with a single email Naomi forwarded to me early Monday morning, an internal company memo stripped of names but heavy with meaning. Senior management changes effective immediately. People like Evan didn't vanish overnight. They were erased carefully, line by line, until no one said their names out loud anymore. By noon, my phone buzzed with messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. "I'm so sorry. I had no idea. If you need anything," they all meant the same thing. They finally knew. That afternoon, Thomas Reed called again. His voice was calm, professional, but there was something final underneath it. "There was a board meeting this morning," he said. "Security escorted Evan out of the building." I closed my eyes, not because I was shocked, because I could picture it. The glass tower Evan once bragged about, the lobby he strode through like it belonged to him, the badge that no longer opened doors, the looks people tried not to give him as he carried a box that held the remnants of a life he thought was permanent. He tried to argue, Thomas continued, said this was personal, that his family issues were being used against him. "And?" I asked. "And the board reminded him that integrity isn't optional," Thomas said, "especially not when it's billed to the company." After the call, I sat in silence for a long time. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt finished. Later that day, Madeline's name surfaced again, not from her, but through whispers. A mutual acquaintance texted Naomi screenshots from a professional group chat. Her contract termination had spread. So had the reason. Unethical relationship, conflict of interest, reputation risk. By evening, her social media was gone. No goodbye post, no explanation, just absence. That night, Evan tried one last time. An email, no subject line. "I lost everything today. I hope you're happy." I read it once. Then I deleted it. Because the truth was, I wasn't happy about his fall. I was relieved that it was over. Grace called around dinner, her voice heavy but resolute. "He's staying with me for now," she said. "He's angry, embarrassed, still blaming you." "I know," I replied. "But," she added, "he can't hurt you anymore." That mattered. I tucked my son into bed that night and sat beside him, watching his chest rise and fall without struggle, without fear. Outside, the city hummed on. People laughed, cars passed. Life continued, indifferent to one man's collapse. Evan had built his power on secrecy and control. When both were taken away, there was nothing left to hold him up. And for the first time since Christmas night, I understood something deeply and completely. Justice doesn't always look like punishment. Sometimes it looks like removal. The removal of access, the removal of influence, the removal of the lie that one person gets to decide another's worth. I turned off the light and lay down beside my son. Tomorrow, we would wake up and keep living. and Evan would have to do the same, without us. Healing didn't arrive all at once. It came in small, almost invisible moments that didn't feel important until I realized how different my life had become. The first was the grocery store. I stood in the aisle, comparing prices without that familiar knot in my stomach, the one that used to tighten every time I reached for my wallet, wondering if a card would be declined or if I'd be questioned later. I bought what we needed. Nothing extravagant, just enough. And when I paid, no alert buzzed, no message followed. No one controlled it but me. At home, my son sat at the table coloring while I unpacked the bags. He hummed softly, the sound loose and unafraid. His inhaler sat untouched on the counter, insurance fully restored, refills automatic now. A small thing, but it felt like freedom. We fell into routines. Morning walks to school, evenings with simple dinners and quiet laughter. On weekends, we visited the park, and I watched him run without counting breaths in my head. The constant vigilance faded, replaced by something gentler. One evening, Naomi came over with takeout and news. "The court finalized the long-term custody arrangement," she said. "Primary physical custody stays with you. Evan's visitation remains supervised until further notice." I nodded, absorbing it without the rush of adrenaline I'd expected. "And support?" I asked. "Locked in," she replied. "No loopholes." After she left, I sat alone on the couch, letting the silence wrap around me. Not the heavy silence of fear, but the kind that lets you think clearly. I started therapy the following week. At first, I talked about Evan, about betrayal, about control. Then, slowly, the focus shifted. We talked about me, about how I learned to shrink, about why I mistook peace for boredom and control for safety, about the woman I was before everything narrowed around one man's needs. I bought a used book on Stoic philosophy, not because I was trying to be strong, but because I wanted to understand how people survived loss without becoming bitter. I read a few pages each night after my son fell asleep, not rushing, not forcing insight. One afternoon, while waiting to pick my son up from school, I ran into Thomas Reed by chance. We exchanged polite greetings, nothing more. But as he walked away, he turned back. "I'm glad you're doing okay," he said simply. I smiled. "I am." And I meant it. Healing wasn't dramatic. It didn't come with apologies or grand gestures. It came with safety, with choice, with mornings where my body didn't brace for impact before my feet hit the floor. Late one night, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. I looked older, tired, softer around the edges, but my eyes were steady. For years, I thought surviving meant enduring. I was wrong. Surviving meant leaving, and healing, real healing, meant staying gone. As I turned off the light and went to bed, my son murmured in his sleep, safe and warm in the next room. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was rebuilding. I felt like I was finally living. And tomorrow, there was still one chapter left to write. The next Christmas arrived quietly. No drama, no dread, no phone calls I was afraid to answer. Snow dusted the sidewalks outside our new apartment, thinner and smaller than the old place, but brighter somehow. We didn't have a tree that brushed the ceiling or ornaments chosen to impress guests who never really cared. We had a modest one from the corner lot, slightly uneven, decorated with paper stars my son made at school. They were perfect. On Christmas Eve, I let him stay up late, sipping warm cocoa and laughing as we watched a movie he'd already memorized. When he fell asleep on the couch, his breathing slow and easy, I carried him to bed without fear, chasing every step. That alone felt like a miracle. The court papers had been finalized weeks earlier. Primary custody, stable support, clear boundaries. Evan existed now only in scheduled reports and supervised hours that no longer ruled my emotions. He had apologized once, through his attorney, It didn't ask for forgiveness. It asked for relief. I declined to respond. Some things don't need closure. They need distance. On Christmas morning, there was a knock at the door. I wasn't startled. When I opened it, Thomas Reed stood there holding a small gift bag, looking faintly uncomfortable. "I hope this isn't inappropriate," he said. "Naomi said it wouldn't be." I smiled. "It's fine." We'd kept in touch over the months, not in a dramatic way. Just conversations, check-ins, coffee once, then again, respectful, slow. He never asked me to rush healing or redefine myself around him. He simply showed up. My son woke and ran into the living room, stopping short when he saw Thomas. "Hi," Thomas said gently. "Hi," my son replied, curious but calm. They talked about toy cars and snow and nothing important at all. That mattered. Later, while my son played, Thomas handed me the bag. Inside was a simple silver necklace. No engraving, no promise wrapped around it. "I'm not trying to replace anything," he said quietly. "I just wanted you to have something chosen without expectations." I felt tears sting my eyes, not from pain, but from recognition. "Thank you," I said. We didn't make grand declarations that day. We cooked breakfast together, took a walk through the park, watched the city glow as evening fell. Before he left, Thomas paused at the door. "I care about you," he said, "but I'll wait. However long you need." I didn't answer right away. Then I reached for his hand. "I'm not afraid anymore," I said. "That's new for me." He smiled softly. "That's enough." That night, after my son fell asleep, I sat by the window and watched the lights blink across the city. 1 year ago, I had been kneeling on the floor, counting breaths, answering a call meant to humiliate me. Tonight, I was whole, not because someone saved me, but because I chose myself and protected my child when it mattered most. Somewhere out there, Evan lived with the consequences of his choices. Here, in this quiet room, lived the reward of mine. And for the first time, the future didn't feel like something I had to survive. It felt like something I deserved. And so, the story comes to a close. But before we leave, let me ask you something. Are you still here with us right now? If you are, then something in this story has touched your heart in a quiet but powerful way. Because this was never just a drama about betrayal or revenge. It was about choice. The moment when someone stops asking, "How do I endure this?" and starts asking, "Why am I tolerating what is breaking me?" The Stoics believed that while we cannot control what happens to us, we can always control how we respond. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That strength is what healed Hannah. Not anger, not punishment, but clarity. This story reminds us that walking away is sometimes the bravest form of self-respect, that protecting your peace is not selfish, and that consequences are not cruelty. They are balance. Healing doesn't come from watching others fall. It comes from standing back up and choosing yourself without guilt. If this story resonated with you, if it mirrored a feeling you couldn't name, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue telling stories that heal, awaken, and remind us all. You deserve a life that doesn't require survival mode.